All right. Okay, we're gonna get started. So sorry for the short delay. What we're going to go over today is a review of the really the new financial aid process, and we'll get into all the changes for the 24-25 year. I'm assuming most of the people on the call are for prospective fall 24 students. If you are a student thinking of coming in for this current spring 24, that is still based off of the 23-24 FAFSA. So make sure, hopefully you've already done that. We should already have your FAFSA in if you're starting in the spring. So make sure you do that as soon as possible if you haven't. So this will really apply for next year for fall 24. Okay. My contact info, not going to do it. Hang on. There we go. Here's my contact information. If you do have any questions, this is our main line. So really anyone of my team can help assist with any questions you might have about the FAFSA process or the financial aid process. And there's our email as well. Okay, so for the 24-25 year, as you probably have heard already, it has gone through what they're calling a simplification process. And what this means is that a lot of the questions are being reduced on the FAFSA, the number of questions are being reduced, but it also means that they're switching up how things are calculated and how financial aid is going to be determined moving forward. And because of this insane amount of changes that are happening. It's taken a lot of extra time. So typically the FAFSA will open up in October 1st of every year, but this year it was delayed and just opened up really January 1st pretty much is when it opened up, a day before, but it's in a soft launch period, meaning that there's testing going on. It might be down for some periods of time. They did say this morning, actually, that it's now available 24/7, which is great, but there's still some issues that they haven't figured out yet. So some people might have some issues still completing the actual FAFSA and still get an error message on certain areas. So it's kind of hit and miss. I still kind of suggest waiting another week or two for some more of the bugs to be flushed out, and then going ahead and completing it as soon as possible after that. But even though you are able to complete the FAFSA now, schools will not be receiving any of the FAFSA information, any of the actual files with the FAFSA information in it until end of January, early February. So unfortunately, we're kind of limited with what we can assist with being able to see what the problem might be in the FAFSA or helping you through some of the questions, because we unfortunately don't have access to any of that information at this moment and won't get that until, again, late January, early February. As soon as we do get that information, we will start, there's unfortunately a large process of having to wait for our software companies to update their stuff from the federal government. It's kind of a domino effect, unfortunately. So it will be a little bit longer before we are able to send out financial aid offers. But in following years, hopefully, fingers crossed, it will go back to being open and available on October 1st for all following years. What you can do now, though, if you haven't done so already, and hopefully you've already done this, and maybe you've even completed the FAFSA already. It kind of just depends if you were one of those early ones to start doing it this past week. But what you should be doing now is creating your FSA ID. Your FSA ID, will be like your electronic signature for really all things federal. So the student will need their own FSA ID, and at least one parent will need their FSA ID. Potentially two parents might need an FSA ID. It really depends upon their filing status, for taxes. We'll get to that in a little bit. But I'm encouraging really all parents to create one because you may need it down the road. In order to do this, you will need your social security number, date of birth, and an email address and contact information. One thing to note on the FSA IDs, they do have to be separate email addresses. So if parents share an email for some reason, another one's going to have to be created because each FSA ID has to match up with an individual email address. So the FAFSA. So after you do complete your FSA ID and get that created, it can take a couple of days for that to be verified by the Department of Education. So again, I highly suggest doing that as soon as possible. But once you have that, and once you do get into the FAFSA to complete that, what is the FAFSA? Well, it is the free application for federal student aid. key word there being free. So, don't go to a website that's asking you to pay for it. Studentaid.gov is the main website and the only website you should be going to complete the FAFSA and anything else federal, really. It's really the driving factor in determining eligibility for aid other than merit-based scholarships. So it is really important in order for you to receive really any federal or financial aid outside of maybe an institutional scholarship from the university. Again, the application for 24-25 is open, and it is going to be based upon the 2022 tax year information. And again, get that done as soon as possible. By the end of January, early February would be fantastic. This is an example of what the website will look like when you go there to complete it. You'll see it will say 24-25 FAFSA, start a new form is where you're going to click on there. If you've already started one, you can go to edit existing form. One note is that people are not yet allowed to make corrections yet. If you've already submitted it and need to go back, you can't do that until late in January. So if you've already submitted it and need to make changes, you're going to have to kind of just wait a little bit. But if you haven't submitted it yet, you can go to edit existing form. And if you do need to complete something for this current year, 23-24, if you're a spring admit, you would go there right below it. So what I'm going to do now is take you through examples of what it will look like completing the FAFSA. It's not every single screenshot. There's a lot of demographic information that we're not going to touch on that students would have to go through and potentially complete that. So I've selected really the highlights of it, and we're acting as if the student is completing the FAFSA form first or starting it first. You can do it the other way. The parent can complete their section first and then kind of pass it off to the student, but we're taking it from the point of view of, sorry, let me just hit it all there. We're taking it from the perspective of the student starting it first. The student would log in using their FSA ID username and password that they already created, hopefully. You can create it when you're in there, but I don't recommend it, again, because it can take a few days for it to actually be verified. So I do suggest, again, having this done beforehand. But they would log in with their FSA ID. And when they get there, there we go. It is going to then ask, are you the student or are you the parent completing this? If they're the student, of course, starting their section, they would say that they are the student. It will then take them to just verify their identity information. This is based upon what they completed for the FSA ID. So if they just did it within the past week or so, it should be correct information. But if it's been, a year, a couple years, whatever it might be, even for yourselves, when you're viewing it for yourself, just make sure that the information is correct. The next piece is a new step, and it's really important. The next piece is that the student needs to provide consent. And what they are giving consent to is allowing the Department of Education to use their federal tax information from the IRS. They're giving consent for it to be directly imported into the FAFSA. And even if they didn't file taxes during the 2022 year, they still need to give consent. If consent is not given, they will not be eligible for any federal student aid. And this is true for also if you as the parents do not give consent, the student will not be eligible for any federal aid. So again, it's really important that everyone whose information needs to go on the FAFSA is providing that consent piece. It will give you several options or opportunities to give consent. It will give you a warning. If you say, decline consent, it will give you that warning of, just so you know, FYI, if you don't give consent, student's not eligible. So there are opportunities to go back in there and make that correction if needed. It will then take the student to what they're calling a parent wizard tool this year. And it's trying to help the student to determine which parent or parents need to be reported on the FAFSA as contributors. Now, if the parents are bio parents and are married and living together, then both parents' information will go on there. But really the questions come into play of when the parents are divorced or separated. So if the parents are divorced or separated, you're going to answer the questions about the parent who provided the greater portion of the student's financial support during the previous 12 months, even if the student doesn't live with them. So this is a big change because previously, if anyone has ever done a FAFSA before, it used to be based upon whoever the student lived with more than 50% of the year with. That's no longer the case. It is based upon whichever parent provides the greatest amount of financial support. And if that parent happens to be remarried, as of when you're filing the FAFSA, you would also include the step parent's information as well. So to go into a little bit more detail on that, again, is whoever provides the greatest amount of financial support in the previous 12 months. If for some reason neither parent was supporting the student in the previous 12 months, you go to the prior 12 months, kind of keep on going back until you figure out who supported them the most. And if for some reason it is a equal 50-50, amount of support, then the parent of record would be the student with the parent who has the greatest income or assets, or a combination of assets. So again, that's really going to be on the family as a family unit to kind of decide. Financial aid officials are really not going to be delving into this unless some type of conflicting information comes up. But trying to determine the amount of support, you can look at things like child support paid, if the parent received any federal or state benefits on behalf of that student, or if the student is dependent on their health insurance. That would all kind of count as support. So that's something that families will have to sit down and kind of figure out which parent or parents would need to be reported. So once, and this is just an example of the start of the parent wizard of them trying to figure out, which parent does need to be reported. It's going to ask about their marital status, and then kind of go on from there. And once they determine who needs to be reported, the student will then have to provide those parents' information. So they'll need to know their first and last name, their social security number, and their date of birth. Hopefully you guys are sitting down together as a family to do this, because most times, students, typically don't know their own socials, let alone parents. So hopefully you're sitting down and doing this together as a family. And then they would also need to put in an email address for you. And this is where you will be invited to then be a contributor and give your consent for the FAFSA. So the student's putting in their information, this parent will get an email inviting them, and then they would go in and complete their section, which we'll get to in a little bit. After the student invites the parents or parents, whoever it might be, they are taken back to asking some information about the tax returns. Now, like if they filed taxes and they gave consent, the information's already going to be loaded behind the scenes from the IRS. There's nothing they have to do on that. There's a few additional questions that are not imported in directly from the IRS. It's about asking about like foreign earned income exclusions and like AmeriCorps scholarship benefits. Most times high school students don't really have those things. They probably won't have to answer that. But if they do have any one of those, they would put that in there. It will then go on to the asset questions. There is some skip logic in here as well, like previous FAFSAs, but students may be asked about their assets or may not, depending upon previous answers. But assuming that they would have to report assets, it is going to be, cash, savings, checkings accounts as of the day you're filing the FAFSA, net worth of business and investment firms, or other investments like real estate. Again, most times high school students don't have a lot of these things, but this would apply to the parents as well. We'll get to that section in a minute. I just put it, this is directly from the FAFSA paper version. We were waiting on some clarification because some of the wording was a little weird, but I wanted to go over some of the things that are considered assets. What net worth means. It's the current value as of today, after debts and all that good stuff. Doesn't include the house you own, but if you have like a rental property or a second home or something like that, trust funds, money market accounts, CDs, stocks, options, those types of things would be considered investments. They also include 529 plans or other qualified educational benefit plans. One change, which is what we were waiting on clarification for that we did receive, is that for the 529 plans, you are only reporting if the parent is the owner or the student is the owner. In those cases, if it's the student owner of a 529 or a parent owner, then it goes under parent assets. It would not be reported as a student asset. One change is that you are no longer reporting 529 plans, like the value of those plans, for other students in your household that aren't the student. So if they have a sibling, you're not including theirs. It's only the students that are owned by the student themselves or the parent. If you have a grandparent or like an uncle or something or aunt that is the owner of an account, you would not report those either. Just the ones that are owned by the student or the student's parents. And it goes under parent assets, not students' assets. I know it gets a little confusing, so if you do have other questions, feel free to plop those in the chat. But That is one of the changes this year. And again, we were waiting on clarification of that. That wording has changed, so we do have to update that. It does not, investments does not include like your 401ks or retirement accounts. It does not include that. You're not reporting the values of those. One difference as far as investments and assets go this year is small businesses. So before, you would not have to report a small business or an investment or like a farm or like a small family farm if you had like less than 100 employees. That exclusion is gone. So regardless of the size of your business, you would now have to report the net worth of that business as of the day you're filing the FAFSA. So after the student gets through the asset questions, and again, most times students themselves won't have anything to really put in there. It's more so on the parent side. They then go into putting down which colleges they want the FAFSA to go to. So this is now up to 20 schools. It used to be 10. It's now 20. So hopefully that covers all the schools that they want to apply for. 20 seems like a lot to me. I applied for maybe like 6 back in the day. So they can do that. I have heard that there have been some issues with adding schools like by name. So there's some problems with that, but if they have the school code, which they can search, on just, Google, they can just Google it to see what the school code might be. They can add it that way. And hopefully that is fixed in the near future. Once they add their colleges on there, they will then go to the review section to say, hey, these are the people you added as parent contributors. Is this correct? Review. It will give a little status saying, okay, the invite has been sent. You're just kind of waiting on the parent to log in on their end. And then it takes them to the last part where the student will sign their section. Now, again, if they are the ones that are starting this, they are just signing for their section that we just went over. It will then give them an email, a notification saying you've completed your part, but you need to go ahead and your parent, a contributor, needs to also do their part before it will be submitted. So this is really just step 1, and then parents have to do step 2. The parents will get an email, something similar to this, coming from studentaid.gov, and it will say, hey, Johnny has put you down as a contributor, has invited you to sign off on your portion. Click here, and it will take you directly to the link. Again, I've heard some issues with this, that the link isn't working, or the parents will go there, My Activity Center, and it's just kind of blank. There's nothing for them to do. They're working on that as well. And hopefully if you log in directly with your FSAD, you should be able to see the sign-off section. This is an example of what the My Activity is supposed to look like for parents when they log in. It'll say, okay, you've been requested to be a contributor. And then it will, get started on that, and you can go ahead and get into your section. Then it will take you, once you do log in, it will take you to the parent provides consent page. And just as before, I will highlight this again because it is very important. If you do not give consent, the student is not eligible for any federal aid. It will then take you to a section asking about your marital status, and this is trying to determine whether or not another person needs to be added as a contributor, or if only you are able to do it on your own. It will ask some questions about if any federal benefits have been received. You would check the boxes if yes, and if none of those apply, you just check that box. And for the federal benefits received, it's either in the 2022 year or the 2023 year. So either one of those years, if anybody in the household received any of those benefits, you would check those boxes. It will then ask about the student's parents' tax filing status for 2022. Did you file married joint or separate, with the current spouse or not? Again, it's kind of just taking you through the steps to determine whether or not only one parent needs to be a contributor and sign off, or if someone else does. So typically, if the parents filed married filing joint, only one parent needs to be a contributor. If you married filing separate, then both parents would need to be contributors. Or in a case of maybe just newly married and, both parents, or parent and step parent, one did had a household and one did single or whatever, again, both parents of those parents would have to be contributors. So the only time only one parent can be the contributor is if it's married filing joint. This is also a really important section that's new, or I should say different. It's now, instead of household size, it's now called family size. And how they're determining this is based upon the number of exemptions on the tax returns from 2022 for that particular year. So it's going to ask you, is the parent's family size different from the number of individuals claimed on the taxes? But the thing is that they won't tell you automatically what they're polling. So you need to say yes, even if you think it might be the same, you need to say yes so that it pops up to then say, oh, the parent's family size is 3. Is this correct? And it might be correct, but maybe you have another, dependent, an older child who filed their own taxes and isn't on yours, but they're still living in your house and you still provide more than 50% of their support. So you would then need to manually add them to the section down here. So I recommend just hitting yes to see what it's going to be. If there's no changes, you just move on. But if there are a different amount of people in the household than compared to what your 2022 taxes said there were, you need to go ahead and make that manual update. They do give you that option. It will then take you to the parent number in college for the student. So this is not the parents themselves, but it's the student and then any other siblings that might be in college. So this question is still asked, but unfortunately, they are no longer taking into account the answer into the federal formula. So which means that previously, parents or families used to kind of get a benefit of having multiples in college. Your financial contribution number from the FAFSA would really be divided in half or by 3, depending upon how many students you had in college at the same time. That's no longer happening. So they're still thankfully asking the question. So schools will still see the response and might be able to do something on their end. If they have a scholarship or something, however they're determining their aid. But the federal processor is not going to be taking that into account. So your student aid index, formerly the EFC, which we'll get to in a second, is going to stay the same regardless of how many students are in college at the same time. And I've been asked this many times this past week when I've been doing some presentations. I don't know why they changed it. They said it was for a fairness thing, so it's now really based upon tax information and number in household versus number of people in college. But I know if you have multiples in college, it's not a great thing. And then it will then take you to questions about your tax return information. Again, it's just really only a few of the questions that weren't able to be imported from the IRS that you would have to potentially respond to. And then it will then take you to your asset portion. Again, we went over what those assets were previously and what that needs to be included. One additional part is that they will also ask about child support in this section. They did not in the student section. They will ask that here in the parents. It used to be included as kind of more sort of an income question in that section. It's now been moved to the assets. Unfortunately, this also doesn't exactly go along with the tax filing year. One change on this is that the amount of child support that you are going to be reporting, if you received any, is that it's based upon whatever you received in the most recent complete calendar year. Now this year, because you're not doing the FAFSA until 2024, the most recent completed calendar year is 2023. So everyone's going to be using 2023 for that section for this year. But moving forward, when the FAFSA opens in October, for next year, the most recently completed calendar year is still going to be 2023. But if you don't file it until January, then it becomes 2024. So it's really going to be based upon when you filed the FAFSA. Moving forward, it will be based upon how much child support you are reporting. And then potentially it might ask you for other parent information if there is another spouse in the household that did not get reported previously. Again, they're just trying to see if anybody else needs to be added as a contributor and give their consent. And then once all that happens, and the contributor, signs off on the FAFSA and submits it, they will get an email saying, congratulations, it's been submitted, it's processing. The student will get an email saying it's been processed and then giving them next steps. Now, typically, processing takes maybe only a couple of days, but right now, it's going to be taking a little bit longer. Like I said, schools aren't going to be receiving any files until end of January, early February. But when they do get this email and when they can go in there and look at things after some processed, it will tell them, give them a submission summary of all the information they put on there that they can see just to review everything. It will give them an overview of all the schools that they listed, comparing them, and then also what their SAI is, which we'll get to in 1 second. It would also give them an overview of potential aid that they're eligible for, the Pell Grant and the amount, potential direct loans, potential work study. I have also heard that some of these amounts are not correct. Some are telling people that they're eligible for Pell when they're not, or vice versa. So you'll know for sure, again, hopefully all this gets worked out very shortly with the federal government, but you'll know for sure once you start receiving your financial aid offers from the schools, what those official amounts are. It will also give the students what their student aid index is. This is the new name for the EFC, or the expected family contribution. That language is no longer being used. It's now renamed to the SAI, the student aid index. One thing with SAI is it can now be negative. It can go all the way down to negative 1,500. To us, that's still a zero. Anything below a zero to us, financial aid world, is still a zero. But what it means for you, if you do have a negative SAI, it means that you are eligible for the maximum amount of the Pell Grant. So that's really where that negative amount number comes into play. And then, as I mentioned earlier, will be able to compare whatever schools they listed for the FAFSA to go to. It'll give them the graduation rates, retention rates, default rates, all those good things that they can start looking at for when considering what colleges to attend. And then after the FAFSA submission, again, typically 3 to 5 days, not happening right now. Hopefully as we get rolling, and it'll be back to that 3 to 5 day processing time. And then schools will start to receive that. This year is odd, it's funky, everything is delayed. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. Everything really needs to be updated. So much stuff behind the scenes that you don't see. Department of Ed needs to send their data and everything to our software companies, who then have to, test and create stuff, who then have to send it on to the schools. And our IT folks have to do testing, and then we have to do testing. It's a long process, and there's a lot involved. So unfortunately, it's not really to snap your fingers this year and things are going to be rolling. Every school is going through this. So financial aid offers are going to be delayed. I had originally hoped, like February we'd be getting stuff out, but it's probably going to be end of February, early March. And that's if all goes well. So you'll see those financial aid offers flow out, between February, March, April is when you will really start to get all those offers. All right. I'm going to keep on going through the rest of the presentation, which talks about when you do get your financial aid offers, and then we'll hit back to any of the questions. I just want to make sure to get through these next slides, and then we'll double back, because I see there's lots of questions in there, and we will answer all of them, but I want to get through this other stuff first. Okay, so when you do start to receive your financial aid offers in the mail, or maybe through a portal, each school is different. There's some common themes you're going to see, and I wanted to go over what a lot of these things are. So the first thing is the cost of attendance, or the COA. And think of this as your budget. This includes things like direct cost. These are things that are charged directly to your bill: tuition, fees, maybe books and supplies, potentially, depending upon the school, room and board if you're going to be living on campus, things you will see on your bill. The other stuff is indirect cost, which would be room and board if you're not living on campus, transportation, personal costs, books and supplies, potentially, things that we know you will encounter throughout the year, but you won't actually see it charged on your bill. So those two things combine to create the cost of attendance, and it can vary widely from school to school, because you have, costs are very different. Whether you're at NTRIP or NU or at Harvard, very different cost of attendances. If you live on campus versus commuting, very different costs associated with those as well, potentially. So everyone's a little bit different depending upon what their unique situation is. You then have the student aid index, which is what I talked about before. This is derived from all the information you put in the FAFSA, parent and student, stuff combined. And then this is going to be the same regardless of the college you go to. The SAI does not change. That is going to be the same regardless you go to. You then have financial need. So you take your cost of attendance, or your budget, you minus away the student aid index number, and that remaining amount is financial need. And that means schools can package you with need-based aid up to that amount. So again, depending upon if you're living on campus or commuting, or what schools you're going to or looking at, your financial need could be different at each school. and even within the school, because again, being a commuter and being a resident probably have different aid packages attached to those. You then have the different types of financial aid. So there's four main groups. Scholarships, that's, free money along with grants, but scholarships are typically based upon, high school average, GPAs, your test scores, maybe an athletic, something that, you've earned for an achievement of more so. Grants are more along like need-based grants based upon maybe the FAFSA form, having financial need at the school, but scholarships and grants, free money, don't have to pay those back. You then have loans. So you will be offered federal loans if you file a FAFSA form. You are offered these. You don't have to take them if you don't want to, but because you filed the FAFSA, we do have to offer them to you. But again, it's up to you as a family to decide whether or not you want to take those. And these ones that will be in the financial aid offers for the students are in the student's name. They are student loans. There's also Parent Plus loans, which are federal loans for the parents, private loans. So there's a couple different options for the loan world. And then employment and also loans, want to make note, you do have to pay those back. So it is something that it is money given while you're in school, but you do have to pay that back, unlike scholarships and grants. And then employment, this is either work study, through which is a federal government program based upon having financial need, or maybe some type of student employment on campus that has nothing to do with work study, but you have to work for that money to earn either a paycheck or to have some of it go towards your bill. So those are the four main categories that most aid is going to fall into. The sources of this financial aid: federal government's the largest, of course. We'll get to more detail in a second. States, if you're a New York State resident attending a New York State school, you might be eligible for some New York State money. Other states might have some programs as well. One thing typically to note with those is that typically most states don't allow you to take that money with you if you're going to a different state. So for example, if you're a New York State resident, but you're going to Pennsylvania for college, you can't take that New York State money with you. It has to stay in the state. And most other states are like that as well. Colleges and universities themselves, our merit scholarships, our need-based grants, our endowments, things that we give either based upon what you've done or maybe your FAFSA form. And the last three are things that you kind of have to look for on your own. Private sources, civic organizations, churches, employers, all those things that, there's a ton of local scholarships out there that you can apply for, but you have to do it on your own. And then, if you are awarded any of those would help pay down whatever balance you might have. So a little bit deeper into each of these. As I mentioned, federal government's the largest source of financial aid. Most of the aid that comes from here is based upon having some type of financial need, that calculation we talked about a little bit ago. And you do have to apply for it every single year. It is an annual process using the FAFSA form. Yes, I know this year's a little wonky, but next year we'll be back to October 1st, fingers crossed. And moving forward, October 1st is when it would open up. Some of the more common federal aid programs you will see throughout the process: the Pell Grant is probably the most well-known, largest program. These calculations have changed for 24-25 as well. It used to be kind of based solely what your EFC SAI was. It's now based more along income and number and household guidelines, like poverty guidelines, certain percentages of those. One of the nice things about all the simplification stuff and the changing of the FAFSA and all these formulas is that the government is projecting about 20 to 25% increase of students who are eligible for Pell, which will be nice. So hopefully more middle class, families will be eligible for some of that Pell Grant money. Teach Grant, if you're thinking of going into the education field. Opportunity Grant, you do have to be eligible for the Pell Grant to get the Opportunity Grant. And unlike the Pell, where if you're eligible, you get it no matter what, the Opportunity Grant, there's limited funding at each school, so you may or may not see this in your packages. Federal Work Study, you do have to have that financial need component. And as I said earlier, you do have to work to earn this money, which you can then use as a paycheck or to put on your balance. Then the loans that I talked about earlier, these are in the student's name. The subsidized is a need-based, so you have to have that financial need component. But the nice thing about that one is that the government pays the interest on that while the student is in school. The unsubsidized loan, they do not pay the interest, so it is accruing while the student's in school. Again, both of these are in the student's name. And the PLUS loan, as I mentioned earlier, is a parent loan through the federal government. This will always be in the parent's name. There's no way to transfer that over to the student, but it is an option that some of our parents go with to help pay the remaining balance. State aid programs. You do have to live in, if you're a New York State resident, have to live in New York State, as I mentioned earlier. Most of their funds through New York State are based upon having financial need. They have for New York State students, there's a cutoff of 80,000 for the New York State net taxable income for a family. If you're above that, you wouldn't be eligible for the TAP. But there are some other merit-based awards through New York State. There's also the Excelsior program if you are thinking of going to a state school. So there's a couple different options that they have as well. So I know it says on here that it does use information from the FAFSA, and typically it does, but not this year because of all the changes. The government was not ready for this part of it. So for this year, and hopefully this year only, you will have to do a separate New York State application for financial aid. So you have to do the FAFSA form, the New York State form, and that's at hesc.ny.gov. We'll put that in the chat in a second. You have to go there to do a separate application for any TAP New York State programs. And if you're thinking of Excelsior, there's a third application for that, but that one typically doesn't open up until April. And as I mentioned earlier with the private sources, these are things that you are looking for on your own as students. This is really the time now that a lot of these applications start opening up, and they're typically due March and April. So start looking into it now. Talk to your local high school guidance counselor. I know there's one specific to high schools, Community Foundation of Greater Buffalo, the one for Rochester. There's different ones across the state. Look into those. Yes, there's scholarships.com, there's fastweb.com, and those are great, but those are for national, that's everyone in the nation. Really focus on any local ones you can. There's a ton out there, and sometimes we don't get a lot of applicants. Yes, you might have to write an essay. I get it. Nobody wants to write an essay, but kind of reuse where you can. And just, try your best, because sometimes students get $500, sometimes they get $5,000. $500 helps with books. 5,000 helps a lot more than books. So really, and they can add up. So really that's something you should be doing on your own now and applying to as many as possible. And then also private lenders for student loans as well is an option if you are looking for another avenue of taking out a loan to cover the balance. All right, just a couple more things before we get to questions. Special circumstances and appeals. So the information that will be used on the FAFSA for 24-25 is the 2022 tax year. And of course, something could have changed since then. Maybe there was a loss of a job, a reduction in income, maybe a divorce or separation, something like that. You're still using 2022 tax year information, but contact the schools, contact us if you explain your situation. And at least at Niagara, we will open up, if it's something that qualifies for one, we will open up a professional judgment. You'll have to upload documentation. You will need documentation. We get audited. We need to have this backup showing the reduction in income or whatever the change might be. And the goal with these PJs is that we would be able to lower or change the information on the FAFSA and then increase the amount of financial aid that might be available. So that's one option. The other option is that there's just nothing has changed, but you just get your financial aid offer, you're looking it over, and you just know that you kind of need some additional information. What you can do is, either contact our admissions office, whoever your admissions counselor is, or us in the financial aid office, and, write up an email or a letter of appeal explaining, why you're looking for additional funding, how much you're looking for, and we will take that to our appeals committee. We haven't started looking at appeals yet. We won't start doing that until after financial aid packages start going out. But then at that point, we meet on a weekly basis. And the last thing I wanted to go over, I will actually put this, we'll make sure we get this sent out to everybody. I know you can't see this, but it is a booklet that I hand out at my high school presentations. And in it, it does have this worksheet. So when you do start to receive all those financial aid offers, I really highly encourage you to do either this or something similar. Break it down. What are the direct charges I'm going to be, having? What's my tuition? What's my fees? Am I in a program that has a special program fee at Niagara? Nursing, business, computer science theater, those all have, additional program fees. Put that on there. Am I living on campus? Am I commuting from home at this school, but not at this school? What aid did I get? What scholarships? What loans? Was I offered work study? Really get it down, to what it's going to be. One, this is going to help you as a family be able to decide what is a good financial fit for you for the next 2-4 years, whichever path your student is going with. But the other thing is that it does help in the appeal process. Oftentimes we'll get appeals students and families comparing us to another school. Just so you know, if that happens, we will ask for that other offer. Because, and the reason we do that, and the reason I encourage you to do this worksheet is because oftentimes we will, have students and parents saying, oh, well, school B gave me, 30,000 and you only gave me 20. Well, school B gave you 30, but they cost 60. We gave you 20, but we cost 40. So you really have to do that math and really break it down to see what those differences are. And this will help everyone get on the same page with that. Okay, that is it for my spiel. That was a lot. I know it's overwhelming. I see there's a lot in the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing so that I can actually have access to the chat.
Martha got through a lot of your questions in the chat.
Oh, she did. Oh, fantastic.
But
okay.
There's still a few.
Okay.
I'm trying to just go through. One of the questions is, I'm part of an online FAFSA group and have heard conflicting info. For the reduced free lunch question, if the student attends a school with free lunch for all, do you check yes or no?
This is a great question that we have been trying to figure out in our office as well. From what we can tell, how the FAFSA is worded is that, and this is kind of a change this year, is that you would say if you received that, it doesn't say that if you were eligible to receive it. It says if your child received free or reduced lunch during, the school year, during 2022, I believe is the year, or 2023 that they're asking, then you would say yes to that. The thing is that the FAFSA, the change this year is that question alone, if you say yes to that question, it's not supposed to allow you to just be able to skip the asset. You're still supposed to if your income is more than $60,000, you should be reporting there. They should be asking you for asset questions. But what's been happening is that it doesn't sound like the FAFSA is working properly, and that it may be not asking you asset questions when it should be. So I know it's really complicated. We're still trying to figure out. So the answer, as far as I know, is that yes, you should say yes, but to that question, but that question should not prevent someone from being able to report assets. You should still be asked assets unless your income's less than 60,000.
Okay.
So yes, but it's not like I know there's been some things that like is maybe a little bit of a loophole to not have to report assets, but it's not supposed to be that way. And I'm sure the FAFSA was looking on correcting it to make sure it does work properly in the future.
Okay. Next question. If 529 is a joint asset with student, is it better to report under student or parent?
You will never, unless the student is an independent student on their own, you will not be reporting it under a student asset. It's counted as a parent asset.
Got it. Okay. If a step parent owns a small business, does that count as an asset?
Yes. If the step parent is required to be on the FAFSA form, they would then, and they own a business, a business of any size at this point, it would be considered an asset. You have to determine its net worth.
Okay. If the 529 is in one of the parents' names and the family has more than one child attending school, how is the 529 contribution split up?
You would, if your plan was to have it available for like 3 students, you would divide it by 3 and put in the amount for that one student.
Okay. This is something that it has been asked multiple times, so it might be just a good idea to touch on it again. Are there scholarships or grants that prospective students can apply for that are not tied to the FAFSA?
So each school is going to be a little different. At Niagara, we do have some based upon, are you a legacy student? Are you from a certain area? So there's different things that are not based upon having the FAFSA form done. For the most part, any of our endowed scholarships do require a financial need component, and we can't determine that until you file your FAFSA.
Yes. Okay. That's what I thought. Do private schools like Niagara offer grants to students to bring costs down to the EFC generated by FAFSA?
So we do offer additional grants if you have financial need, but we don't meet full need. And a lot of private schools, especially locally, do not meet full need for all students. There might be a population or something, depending if it's a special program or whatever. But yeah, most private schools locally are not meeting full need, but typically we do have need-based grants that we are offering to help reduce the cost of tuition and fees.
So if the cost of attendance is more than the student aid index, a school might likely offer a need-based financial grant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Sorry.
You're good.
Martha killed it in the chat.
Perfect.
If you have a change in circumstance, one parent retires in 2024, creating a change of income, will a school change their offer? You touched on this, but I'll let you touch on it again.
Can you repeat the first part? Sorry.
If you have a change in circumstance, i.e. one parent retires in 2024, creating a change of income, will a school change their offer?
So if the retirement has not yet happened, we will not do it. So the retirement has to, or the change, whatever the change might be, has to have happened, and typically also has to be a couple months after, because we are waiting to see if there's going to be a pension amount received, disability, a new job, depending upon what the situation might be. So it most likely won't be reflected in your initial package, but down the road in May or June, whenever something happens, or after it's been a couple months, then we would be able to look at it.
What does a negative SAI mean?
It really just means that you are the neediest and have the most financial need, and that you are eligible for the maximum amount of the federal Pell Grant. Right now, the maximum amount for the year is about $7,500.
Okay. Martha killed it here. Okay, Martha got those. Any suggestions for websites for general scholarships, not school related? Our high school is not very helpful in this, and there seems to be a lot of scams out there when you do generic Google searches for them. Great question.
Yes, that is a good question. I mentioned earlier, like scholarships.com, fastweb.com, those are good national sites. There is a lot out there. You should never have to pay for to apply for a scholarship. So if you ever run into one of those, don't do that. Locally, Community Foundation of Greater Buffalo, which is like cfgb.org, I want to say, is a good resource that has a lot of different ones. Check with the colleges you're applying to. Sometimes we know of additional local ones. Sometimes we have them on our website. Yeah, just kind of keep researching local ones that you can.
Most community foundations, I know in different counties where you live, those are great. Dollars for Scholars. I don't know if you just said that. I was reading a question. That's at some high schools. Those are great ones. Okay. What is the current base no loan or scholarship price of Niagara?
So hang on, I have the current price, and I don't remember if I remember the 24-25 one offhand. So currently for this current year, tuition's $36,100. Student services fees are $1,820. Books are $420 for the year, and room and board is $12,980. That is for this current year, because I have not yet drilled it into my brain what next year's is, but next year's has gone up slightly. Give it like about a 2 to 3% increase is what next year's will be. So that's what it is before any scholarships. Now, a student will receive a merit scholarship if they're a freshman coming in based upon their grades or SAT scores or ACT, and that will be deducted, and then anything else would be deducted after that.
This particular parent is a much better parent than I, because he worked on filling out his FAFSA form on Saturday. I haven't done mine yet. I'm still waiting to be verified as a parent. How long should it take?
I unfortunately do not know. I think it's one of the known problems that they have run into. So I think what we've just been told is like, give it a couple of days and keep trying and kind of restart. You might have to start completely from scratch. So unfortunately, that is a Department of Ed issue, and we do not have an answer for when that will be resolved.
I'm sorry. That's a bummer.
Yeah.
What if the 529 is in the student's name only?
Then it goes on, it's still considered a parent asset.
Okay. If a parent owns land, is that considered an asset?
If it's not the land you live on, then I believe it's considered like an additional property that you would have to report the value of.
You mentioned asking for funding by appeal. You said that once your office gets going, your group meets weekly to discuss and decide about appeals. Is this typical for colleges? What's the general timeline? Just thinking about the 5-1 decision day. We're all thinking about the 5-1 decision day, the
Yes.
timeline. We're all panicking.
So that's Niagara's process. I cannot speak for other schools. They might have a completely different schedule than we do at Niagara. I would assume probably weekly, bi-weekly. I can't imagine they would, at least locally, like be going that long in between proving appeals or reviewing.
Martha got those. Yes, the 24 prices are on the website. They should be.
I I don't know if it's been fully updated yet, so we're working on that.
Okay.
It will be.
Okay. What? Oh, okay, that just jumped. I feel if a student does not get an academic scholarship from Niagara coming in as a freshman, if they do a great job their freshman year and have great grades, is there any possibility for them to receive Niagara academic scholarships for their sophomore year? That's a great question.
So as far as I know, all of our freshman students do receive a merit. But whether they do or they don't, there is no increasing past when their freshman year. So even if they come at, let's say, like the lowest merit scholarship, but they do really great, unfortunately, there's no bumping. It remains whatever it is when you came in.
Katie, somebody asked if the tuition will increase every year, and I said yes, but I didn't know if you could touch on the LTP.
Sure. So yes, tuition typically does increase and fees and room and board, all costs typically increase every single year. However, we do have a plan for our freshman students that you can sign up for. It's called the level tuition plan. It does lock the tuition in for your 4 consecutive years. So typically what happens is that it's a little bit more than the normal tuition charged to students the first year, but then but about the same second year, you start saving in the third and fourth years. So it is a good planning tool and good budgeting tool. That's not available just yet. It will be available when you can start logging into your admissions welcome portal, which won't be for a little bit longer, I believe.
This is another great question. I was trying to find it. Does the tuition cost of a school affect the potential amount that a student receives, or is it purely financial income based? For instance, could a student not be eligible for financial aid from a school that is $25,000 a year, but still possibly get aid for a school that is $50,000 a year?
Great question. And yes, it does. It depends. So like the Pell Grant is considered an entitlement grant. So if you're eligible for that, as long as your cost of attendance is more than that Pell Grant, more than like 7,500, which it's going to be in like 99% of the cases, I'm sure, you would get that Pell Grant. But other aid besides that would be, potentially based upon what the cost difference is from one school to the next.
I can't believe
federal things are really more as long as you have the room, like a room for the Pell Grant, if you have room for the loans, you would be offered those. Other things that are directly from like the schools, like need-based grants, those are going to be based upon what the cost of attendance is.
I think that's it. I hope I didn't miss any. Martha got a lot of them. I'm just trying to go through and make sure if there is
one. Does savings and checking, do savings and checking account count as assets?
Yes. And it's as of the day you filed the FAFSA for those ones. So income is going to be based off of 2022 taxes. Child support this year is based off of what you got in 2023. Assets are as of the day you filed the FAFSA, and that includes like, the net worth of investments and businesses and all that. I do tell people, people will ask, okay, well, I have my student is they're buying a car in 2 weeks. So what I always recommend for that is if you know you're going to be purchasing a large thing like that in the next, month or whatever, don't include that value because you would not have that available for when you do go, for college purposes.
Okay, we're getting a little crazy with the chat again. Can you just touch a little on, a lot of people are asking about scholarship opportunity search, when that comes, what that is. Could you just touch on that while I look at some more questions?
So our
Okay.
Scholarship Opportunity Search, or SOS, it is actually available right now. As long as you're an accepted student, you do have access to that. Now, anyone, even if you're not accepted, anyone can view it on our general site. It does list all of the different endowed scholarships we have. We have over 200 of them that you can search just by keyword, by major, but you can't apply for them until you've been accepted. So as long as you've been accepted and you've created your Purple Pass account already, you can go in there and start applying. I will be sending out emails to incoming students letting them know about this. I haven't done so yet because I was kind of waiting until we got some of the FAFSA information in February, because some of the scholarships are based upon having a FAFSA done. So I didn't want to create more confusion by some of the information not being loaded in there yet, but you can go ahead and do that. And students will get an email once we have it kind of more information loaded from the FAFSA. And you don't have to have a FAFSA on file to apply for them. It's just that the majority of the ones on our endowed portal do have financial need as a requirement. Not all, but the majority.
The lunch question, is it critical to fix that, Katie?
No, I don't think so. Not based upon how the FAFSA was working this year. If we find something funky, we will reach out and let you know that updates need to be made.
Should simple IRA and 403B accounts count as assets? And did you say not to include house you are living in as an asset?
Correct. The house you live in is not considered, do not report that. That is your house. That is not considered an asset that you would report. So if you had like a second home, or if you are like a landlord and renting have rental properties, those types of things, not the house you live in. And the 403, like any retirement accounts, don't get reported.
Anybody else? I mean, I think we've gotten to them all.
Okay, I'm just looking at some of these. International student, I see a question here about international student question. International students would not, unless you're a dual citizen, would not be eligible for work study, federal work study, but we do have other jobs on campus that don't have anything to do with that. And as long as you have all your paperwork, the I-20 and all that stuff, you potentially would be able to be placed somewhere. You would want to contact Career Services. That office, as they have a listing of all the jobs that are available. I mean, they're not going to know at this precise moment what's available. They won't know until it gets closer in the summer, when we see who's returning, who's not returning, who has graduated. But at least they can tell you typically what types of jobs are open. Martha got that one. Let me just see.
How do we
Martha's already
correct the
got
FAFSA if
that.
we need to? I think you can go right in there and correct it.
Not yet.
Not yet, but
So
it's coming.
typically, yes, typically you can go right on in after it's been originally processed and make corrections, but they are not allowing, because they haven't really processed anything on their end yet. So until they've made those first processes of the first FAFSA, once that happens, then you can go in and make corrections. I'm anticipating, honestly, not until the end of January. So you still have a couple more weeks.
Katie, if they say if my husband has a joint account with his sister, is that an asset that they need to report?
If it's something that they have access, if he has access to, then I think, if you're dividing up if they have joint access to it, but he's only eligible to a portion of it, then that's only the portion he would, and if it's something where if it's what I know, my mom used to have a joint access with her sister for my grandma. That was my grandma's money, not really like their money. So if it's that type of situation, you wouldn't be reporting it. It's just if it's his money or partial his money.
Ooh, great question. Does it always benefit a student to file their taxes if they do not earn enough to be required to?
if you don't, I mean, if you make more than the limit, then you have to file taxes, and we will follow up with you for that because it is a verification conflicting information item. But if they didn't meet the limit, then they don't have to file taxes. It's up to them. You know, sometimes you get refunds and credits and that stuff. But for FAFSA purposes, you know, you still have to report the amount that you earned, whether you filed or not. Well, actually, that used to be the case, but I'm thinking now they might have, if you didn't file taxes, but you I will have to look that one up. As far as if they didn't file taxes, if they're still reporting what their income was, that might not be a thing anymore. But if
iPhone
they,
2. iPhone 2, you can catch up with us on that at a future date.
yeah, I will think about that.
Yeah. I know
All
that
right.
Katie's phone, the financial aid phone number, Martha put that in there earlier, and the email. If you have any questions that we didn't answer, or you have more questions, certainly reach out to financial aid. You can reach out to your admissions counselor. Believe it or not, that's what we're here for, to help you answer questions. And if you're a parent and you want to ask a question, that's okay. Don't feel like you can't because you're the parent. We're happy to answer questions at any time. I know this is really confusing and this is a lot. Hence why I haven't done my FAFSA yet.
That's
I'm
okay.
waiting.
There was
waiting.
bugs, so just
Yeah,
let
I'm
the bugs
waiting.
get out and then go back in.
Yes. It doesn't ask for income not reported by students.
Okay.
Does every student get 5,500 federal loan per year through well, it's not through FAFSA.
Yeah, so the money through the FAFSA, the loans through the FAFSA, for a freshman, the cap is 5,500, a sophomore gets 6,500, and then juniors and seniors get 7,500 each that they would be offered.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, we're gonna shut it down. But this session was recorded. So I know all attendees should be able to get a copy of that. I will also send along the copy of our booklet that has a lot of the websites we talked about in there. And again, as Allison mentioned, if you do have any questions that that come up throughout the process, please feel free to reach out to any one of us, either financial aid or admissions. All
Thank you
right.
all. I hope
All
y'all have power.
right. Yes, hopefully everyone has power and stays on. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Stop recording.